warm welcome back, fellow audio enthusiast. Thank you for tuning back into two-channel listening. I'm your host, Jason, and up for review today is the Red King Premium Triode Tube Integrated Amplifier. Yes, quite the mouthful. I'm going to dive right into this. This is from the creator, Eryk S concept, the very same Eryk Smolsky that designed and built these fabulous British Racing Green performance #1 speakers for me. I've owned them for several months now, and I definitely have an affinity for the unconventional designs that Eryk has come up with. So when he gave me the opportunity to purchase his demo unit here, this Red King Premium, his latest integrated, I definitely jumped at the chance. Now, I will say immediately this particular review is going to be a bit of a departure in that in the last 10 years, this is only the third tube integrated amplifier or amplifier that I've owned in those 10 years, and it wouldn't be fair to all of the more budget-oriented integrated amplifiers I have on hand to compare it to. No, folks, for me, this was a luxury purchase, and I had definitely missed that luxurious Class A sound. And so, again, jumping at the chance to buy this demo unit at a nice discount versus what the retail is. So what is the Red King Premium Integrated Amplifier? This is a hand-built, from Warsaw, Poland, hand-soldered, point-to-point amplifier. Now, I would use the integrated part of it, that term, very loosely, because as from a flexibility standpoint, this is a very basic unit. So you have it is a parallel single-ended amplifier, and basically that's because there's two EL84s running to a side. You have a very robust Russian, these driver tubes. These are 6H6Ns, and then a very unusual 6H1NEB for the preamp stage. The EB designation for these little guys is the fact that it's an extended life design. Used in the preamp form, it actually is supposed to give you up to 5,000 hours of functional life in this configuration. So, hand soldered point to point. It does have a small auto bias for circuit for the EL84s, but other than that, everything else is completely point to point. You have a very simplistic volume selection knob on the top. There is no power button in the front. You just have this nice little acrylic light up plate here where Eryk Smolsky wants you to know that this is an ultra direct amplifier. Around the back, again, very sparse, very not huge on flexibility. You only have two inputs. You have these very nice extended RCA inputs, connectors, and then you have your kind of a typical European style speaker taps that only accept the banana plugs. So what you have is a 4 ohm option and an 8 ohm option, along with the light up power button on the very back next to your where your power cord would go into. There is a little switch here, and basically that's, you know, A or B, or selection 1 or 2 for your RCA inputs. There's no phono, there's no DAC, there is nothing else on this unit itself. Eryk does have an option for an additional $500 where you can add Bluetooth Direct with Apex, as well as the fact that if you had a particular Pantone paint color match that you're looking for, he could also do that for an additional $500. If you were to go all out, add custom color to this, add the Bluetooth aptX to this, that would retail for $5,000, again, with shipping from Warsaw, Poland to the United States. As configured, how I have it, it's $4,000 is the retail for this unit. Now, back to the hand-built portion. So the transformer cage is it's a typical metal unit, but the body itself is actually made out of wood, and it has a lacquered piano finish with this nice wood inlay, kind of a dark burled walnut inlay here. The top plate's solid wood, the bottom plate's solid wood, and it's finished off with this nice little leather strap. Eryk is considerate in his designs in that the sides have venting so that there's no hot air being trapped within the unit itself, so it can vent through the left and the right. It also has these very nice stainless steel feet attached to it, very solid. I will say my own concern when first looking at this and knowing that this is a 12-watt Class A operation. Obviously, Class A amplifiers run extremely hot, and I did a little bit of testing with my infrared gun for you guys and took a bunch of pictures so that you could see the differences. My own thoughts for longevity, thinking, okay, we've got this lacquered black or this lacquered white piano. You have a wood top next to extremely hot triode tubes. How long could that hold up? Well, after several hours of operation on a day-to-day, I was able to show you that I could still place my finger in between the tubes, touching the top plate of the wood, and it did not exceed 115 degrees between the two main tubes. At the base, and another nice thing is he's using the ceramic glass tube sockets. So at the base of the socket itself, while it got to 130 degrees, the actual top of the wood or the wood itself, there's a little bit of machining around it so that there's an air gap underneath the sockets. And so you don't have full connection to the sockets to the wood to keep those temperatures down. And then once you move the infrared gun off to the sides, you have pretty much your room temperature, around 80 degrees at the top plate. The transformer cage itself, under full day of operation, would only get to about the low 90s, 90 degrees. So from that perspective, keep in mind that the actual plates themselves inside these EL84s, those reach 355 degrees. As far as the heat dissipation, if this was an entire metal chassis, which is normally what tube amplifiers are made out of, the entire thing would heat up, and this thing stays pretty cool with the exception of the heat coming off of the top of the tubes. But, enough of all of that, the heat operation and that expectation. As I had mentioned, it's 12 watts into 8 ohms, and people will think, wow, only 12 watts. I've got the Opera Grand Mezzas. They're 89 dB speakers. The Performance number 1s, so those are 90 dB speakers. And then I have those Alta IOs that are only 87 dB efficient speakers. At no point did I have any trouble with headroom depending on the type of source gear that I had. I did have to make a switch with the Matrix Audio Element I DAC using the balanced outs to get the full voltage to Eryk's integrated amplifier here so that I could use the full range of the volume. But I also will remind the audience and myself that with the volume attenuation knob up front here, at no point have I ever exceeded 50%. I usually keep it at the 40% mark. And again, as another aside, when it comes to Class A watts and Class A designed amplifiers in general, you're going to get what you're going to get in those first few watts regardless. Ramping up the volume all the way to max isn't going to give you a whole lot more. As a matter of fact, it's just going to make it run that much hotter, and you're going to take down the tube life all the quicker. So, but how does it sound? That's really what it's going to come down to for everybody. What's it like to have a Class A tube amplifier? And that's where the part of this review gets incredibly easy for me, and probably also esoteric for most of you out there who haven't experienced a true Class A operated tube amplifier. It goes like this. Do you want that mid-range presence? Check. Do you want that excellent instrument separation? Check. Do you want that basically you're looking for those delicate treble. Check. Do you want a strong bass pitch? Check. Open, deep, wide soundstage? Check. Do you want very well articulated female as well as male vocals? Double check. And then finally, you want to make sure that you have enough drive to power 90 dB speakers at above average listening with no strain. Check. Makes this really incredibly easy to review this particular amplifier, and in general my experience with Class A amplifiers. It's just the way they operate. This purchasing these has nothing to do with return on investment, has nothing to do with really value. It has nothing to do with does it make sense? And what I mean by does it make sense, this isn't going to give an IRS agent a chance at heaven. While there is a preponderance of all this new Class D technology, out there every single month, the new purified models, there is cheap watts to be had everywhere. There's an abundance of cheap Class AB amplifiers with 200, 300, 400 watts that could be had for, $1,500 to $2,000. There's plenty of that out there, but there is still an incredibly compelling reason why in the year 2021 that audiophiles still flock to tube amplifiers, and particularly Class A tube amplifiers. There is this romantic tone to these types of units that you're not going to get in a typical budget style integrated amplifier, or even some mid-level Class AB and D amplifiers. Look, I would easily say that those monoblocks, the Red Dragon monoblocks that I had at 400 watts a piece, did not sound anywhere near these 12 watts. It's just a different type of topology that if you've never experienced it, you are never, ever, ever going to get it. You will not understand the hype. And we're talking hype like the latest Maggie LRS, that type of hype. You have to borrow a Class A integrated amplifier or a Class A amp and experience it for yourself with your speakers, provided you have good efficiency speakers. Another way of saying this is that let's say cue up Joni Mitchell. You're going to turn up the track at the dark end of the street. You're no longer just listening to music. You, with a good Class A amplifier, you are engaged in an event. That's how I would state it. Your mind, you are locked in and you are experiencing a one-with-one with your favorite recording artist. That's how much of a difference this can shift your mindset when listening to really well-built Class A amplifiers. They are expensive, they are totally inefficient, they don't make rational sense for the majority of the folks on the planet, but I can assure you, this is what makes this hobby so wonderful. No, it's not totally true to tone. No, it's not going for accuracy. There is, and again, let's go with all of the cliches and all of the mushy, non-meaning verbiage that goes with tube amplifiers. Is it smooth? Is it silky? Is it buttery creamy? Is it holographic? Yes, 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 yes. There are certain degrees with particular tube sets, 300Bs, 2A3s. They all have their own little bit of a sonic signature, and they all shift things a little bit one way or the other. At the end of the day, it is the Class A operation that just gives you a different sound, different textures, different tonality. Everything sounds bigger. Everything sounds a little more luscious. Everything feels like you could touch it a little bit more than your typical amplifiers. Now, that's not to say that there aren't super expensive Class A/B amplifiers out there that could get you most of the way there. It is still a different topology, and it still is a different listening experience. I'm sure most of you would be really perturbed at me if I didn't, on some level, say, okay, out of the 20 plus integrated amplifiers that I've owned, what does it sound closest to? Definitely doesn't sound like my Peachtree. Definitely doesn't sound like my Unison Research, which are two of my favorite budget integrated amplifiers. Of everything that I owned, what this amplifier reminds me of is that Lugsman 550AX that I had several years ago. And again, that was the only other Class A integrated amplifier that I had owned at 25 watts per channel. Being that it's a solid state integrated amplifier, it had a lot of that same richness in the mid-range, in the textures, but I would also say that there's still a very memorable, for me, difference in the treble. There's just something odd and yet so wonderful about these point-to-point soldered tube amplifiers. There's just so little in the circuit. Between your source, the amplifier, and your speakers, there is hardly any processing going on whatsoever, mostly with your source. And other than the little auto bias circuit that's in these, for these EL84s, you are just getting, again, to Eryk's point, a very direct sound signature. Quite simply, folks, like I said, this is the easiest review I've ever had to do. It requires the least amount of product-to-product comparisons, and that's only to be fair to the other budget products that I have that I like so well. They're 1/3 the price of what this amplifier goes for on a retail basis. And yet, one also has to remember that the cost of being hand-built and being shipped from Europe, that's going to have its own different impact on US costs. To wrap up this review, and again, to be completely transparent, this was not a budget review on any level. This was not a review to flesh out something that is a top dollar bang for the buck product. For me, this was a product that I wanted to have in my stable for some time to come. I had a desire to listen to Class A sound again. It had been a long time since I've experienced true Class A power in a stereo system, and therefore there was no rationality behind this other than it was just for the aesthetics, for the emotional connection that it brings me to the music itself, and just that intimacy that it gives me with my favorite recording artists. There's nothing practical about this. The price isn't practical, but that's just my opinion. At the end of the day, is it still worth it to me? Absolutely. This is my amplifier, and I'm enjoying the living daylights out of it. And at the end of the day, that's what these purchases are supposed to mean for you. You're buying something that's going to give you that connection, and at the same time, as you look at it, you go, you know what? That is an awesome piece, and it functions exactly how I need it to function. So with that, there's just not much more I can add that wouldn't be more, bizarre, esoteric talk on the matter. If anybody wants to email me directly and ask questions about it, I'm totally open for that. You guys know where to find me. And other than that, I wish you guys all a very good and safe week ahead. Hopefully the forest fires on the West Coast can subside and we get some rain to knock those things down. Other than that, I'm going to skip next week, or they're going to have an off week next week, and the next review I'll be doing are on those semi-vintage Sony SS-M3 large bookshelf speakers. Everybody, thank you for tuning in, thank you for your patience, and I will see you